Icebergs are often known for their beauty and their stately presence. Perhaps you're thinking that today's topic will be about the wonders of marine beauty. Well, actually, our discussion today is about a very common condition with which many of you have firsthand knowledge, and that's diabetes. Now, I was born in the southern United States, and instead of diabetes, they just call it sugar. But the fact is, diabetes is so much more than just high blood sugars. As in the picture of the impressive iceberg, high blood sugar is only the tip of the proverbial iceberg. We know that when it comes to the ocean liner on the tranquil waters, with calm and melodious music, as the ship approaches closer and closer to the iceberg, the music transitions to the ominous bass tones, and you know what awaits. For it's the massive and unforgiving structure which you can't see beneath the water that will sink the ship. Diabetes is a complex metabolic total body condition that affects many organs of the body. You know them: the heart, the kidneys, the circulation, nervous system, eyes, and even the skin. In fact, it's the cardiovascular complications that cause most of the illness related to diabetes. As you will see in the upcoming discussion by Dr. Deal, there are tools within your reach which will help you to navigate away from this lethal iceberg, if you will, to avoid it altogether in some cases, and to minimize the damage if you have already encountered it on your journey. So listen in.
Welcome, everyone. Just want to welcome everyone, obviously, the CHIP facilitators, the CHIP participants, the graduates, other people that might be on the line. Hopefully there are some new people on the line that will be first time joining us. And if you are, we want to welcome you. Want to just shout out a quick prayer again to everyone in the world that's suffering again from this coronavirus pandemic. And it's really interesting that we obviously have to focus on the coronavirus pandemic right now. It's just decimating so many countries and such. But it's really interesting that over the last several decades, we've never really focused on the pandemics that have been ongoing for that whole time period, if you will. And today we're going to talk about the pandemic of diabetes and prediabetes, because that's really the way it is. We've been dealing with diabetes and prediabetes for so many years. And it truly is a pandemic. It's an illness that occurs across the world at this point. And we really need to start focusing some global attention and certainly some national attention on this disease, because it is becoming rampant and it's got so many consequences that I will talk about today. The diabetes definition, we'll talk about that in a moment. And I want to talk about the pathophysiology, why diabetes actually occurs. And we'll talk about pre-diabetes and all the complications. But we're going to go next to the first video clip that will give us more information about the pathophysiology and the definition of diabetes.
What is diabetes? How do we define diabetes? Well, a normal blood sugar is usually between 60 and 100, or between 3 and 6. But when the body is unable to handle glucose and it builds up in the blood, and it's between 100 and 125, or between 6 and 7, then we call it pre-diabetes. And if 2 consecutive fasting blood sugars are above 125 or above 7, then we call it full-blown diabetes. Well, so these are the numbers. Are there some symptoms that we should be concerned about? Yes, there are some classical symptoms, namely increased thirst, and with that frequent urination and increased appetite. But there's also the problem with blurred eyesight and a sense of feeling increasingly tired and tingling in hands and feet. And then there is erectile dysfunction, which is often the first clear sign of diabetes for men. Diabetes, then, is a devastating disease. As a matter of fact, it has been described as the mother of all diseases because it is a powerful promoter of atherosclerosis, the narrowing and hardening of the arteries, and that leads then to vascular complications affecting our total circulatory system and thus doing damage to our organs from head to toe.
So the diagnosis itself is made by looking at blood numbers, the numbers of the blood sugar, if you will. And the hemoglobin A1C is a number that tells us whether or not the individual has average blood sugars over the past 3 months. And that's really one of the most important numbers that we have to look at, and we certainly look at that when we're doing all the numbers for the CHIP program. But it's really important to understand that the numbers that diagnose diabetes is not the same as the etiology. So the diagnostic criteria, if you will, is not the same as the etiology of the disease and what really happens as a result of that. So I want to talk next about what actually happens as a result of the blood sugars being high, and we'll talk about really the etiology of the disease and what actually happens inside the cells. So it's really interesting, and I think in one of the video clips we talk about, or we hear about, the mother of all diseases, and really the mother of all diseases has to do with inflammation, and I'm going to discuss that more in detail. And one of the interesting and kind of tongue-in-cheek terms that you hear is the canary in the coal mine. What is actually tipping people off that there's something going on? And this has to do with the canary in the coal mine actually refers to, for men, erectile dysfunction. But what that actually refers to is the fact that diabetes is the cause of inflammation inside the arteries. So we're going to talk a little bit more about arterial inflammation and the canary in the coal mine and heart disease and such. But I want to look at one of the next video clips. There's actually 2 more video clips that we're going to look at.
Here you see a healthy person, average weight. There's the pancreas, which produces the insulin. The insulin is sent via the bloodstream to the cells, where it acts like a key that is inserted into the cellular locks to open the cellular doors so that the glucose in the bloodstream can get into the cell where it is needed as the fuel to run the machinery. Now here you see a type 1 diabetic, a lean person, a young person. There is the pancreas, but it doesn't produce the needed insulin. And with that, the blood sugar rises, and the cells are starving now for glucose because there is no key to open the cellular gates to allow the sugar to get into the cells where it's really needed. That was type 1 diabetes. What about type 2 diabetes? That represents more than 90% of all the diabetes. These diabetics are different. They're usually overweight, and their pancreas is functioning very well, usually in overdrive, pumping out lots of insulin to open those cellular doors. But somehow, many of these cellular locks are either gummed up, or the insulin signal to open the doors doesn't get consistently transmitted. This then keeps many doors shut, with glucose building up in the bloodstream to diabetic levels, while the cells are starving for more fuel. And then eventually, over time, the pancreas fatigues, burns out. What about diet? Could a simpler diet and lifestyle possibly prevent diabetes? Well, when we look at large population studies, we find that diabetes is rare in populations where people actually live on more traditional plant-based diets. But as these diets become more westernized and as people gain more weight, diabetes consistently becomes more common. Let's go to Harvard and see if they can help us. Here, the famous Nurses' Health Study found over a period of 16 years, 3,300 new cases of diabetes out of a pool of 85,000 nurses. They analyzed the data and they found that 91% of these new cases were directly attributable to lifestyle choices. It wasn't so much genetics, it was 91% lifestyle issues. Diabetes then was not so much a disease of genetics as it was a disease of lifestyle choices. And among those lifestyle choices, nothing was more powerful than the amount of overweight. Listen to this. Comparing those at the highest weight with those at the lowest weight yielded a 40-fold relative risk differential. Did you get that one? 40-fold 40 times more diabetes at the upper end when compared to the lower end. Weight, overweight.
All right, so it's interesting how Dr. Deal really focuses and helps us focus on the issues of weight and the relationship between weight and diabetes, and the role that that fats actually play. When we saw on the video how the insulin receptor, there's a key that opens the insulin receptor or the channel itself and allows glucose to go from the blood into the cell, that's where the problem actually occurs. And we're going to talk in a little bit about what happens with carbohydrates. And so many people actually believe that carbohydrates are the problem, but oftentimes fat is the problem because of the way that it interferes with the receptor. So fats really do play an important role. And actually, when you think about it, diabetics actually have cardiovascular disease as one of the major complications, and one of the major problems that diabetics actually die from is related to heart disease. And that all ties in because people that have a diet that's higher in saturated fats have a higher problem, more problems with weight, more problems with diabetes, more problems with cardiovascular disease. So all of these things really tie in together. And diabetes, when you really look at it, is a complex medical problem. And oftentimes it's associated with other health problems such as high blood pressure, high cholesterol, other metabolic problems that really are lumped into the term metabolic syndrome. So the syndrome really is a condition where the individual is usually overweight, they probably have high blood pressure, they have other metabolic abnormalities, including sometimes a high LDL or bad cholesterol and a low HDL or good cholesterol. So all of those things really relate to the complications that we see in the brain, in the heart, in the kidneys, all areas of the body, because this complication of vascular inflammation really causes the problem. That really is the common denominator. So when we start to think about, we've talked about the definition, we've talked about high blood glucose levels, how fats interfere with the function of insulin, the association between weight, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, all tying into this metabolic syndrome. We start to think about, okay, next, what's the treatment? What do we do? The traditional treatment for diabetes, as most people know, is medication. But is medication really the right treatment? And if you go to and talk with more of a traditional physician, they would say, absolutely, this is definitely the way to go. But I want to talk a little bit more about what lifestyle actually does in comparison to pharmaceuticals. Before I go any further, we have a chat box that you can put your questions in. At the end of this monologue, if you will, I'll answer some questions and we'll go on from there. So typically, prescription drugs are almost straight away given as the so-called treatment for diabetes. We're going to talk about lifestyle. And when we talk about lifestyle, one of the first things, obviously, that we have to talk more about is diet. Many people believe that carbohydrates are the enemy and that a low carbohydrate diet will treat effectively and cure effectively diabetes, but that is absolutely not the case. I think the types of carbohydrates is really what we need to focus on. And most people that are eating the standard American foods are eating the wrong carbohydrates. They're eating a lot of processed carbs. They're eating a smaller amount of whole food carbohydrates. And what we really learn, and I'm going to show you this book now, and I'm going to refer to it later on again. You can probably see this. This is a book called Mastering Diabetes by two individuals that have done extensive research into diabetes. Excuse me, and I think I mentioned this at one of the last shows. I've actually sat at dinner tables with these gentlemen that eat massive amounts of carbohydrates, but they're eating the right carbs. And both of the individuals, Cyrus Kambata and Robbie Barbaro, they both are type 1 diabetics. Their blood sugars are completely under control with A1Cs running around 5.4. So it just shows you that when you're eating the right type of carbohydrates, that's not the problem. The whole purpose of our show is to really reiterate more of the education and the knowledge that we know. And I can tell you now at Lee Health, where I previously worked, and even in the new practice that we're getting into, concierge lifestyle medicine, we're going to continue doing CHIP programs. We've done about 20 previously at Lee Health, where I was previously working. And I can tell you that CHIP is a blessing for diabetics. It's a blessing because it really provides you with the knowledge of how to take a healthy nutrition program, how to make a healthy nutrition program your lifestyle so that you can get diabetes under control, other chronic illnesses under control. You can lower your risks for all of the complications that people get as they get older. And I really focus on, CHIP being a significant part of the foundation for healthy living. Just as a reminder, the CHIP programs now, for people that don't already know, can be done face-to-face, obviously in a safe way if people can socially distance, and getting through this pandemic will make a big difference in that. But CHIP can also be done now virtually via Zoom sessions, and also we have self-guided CHIP programs now, which people can do in the comfort of their own homes. But getting back to the treatment, and again, lifestyle compared to medications, what research has actually shown over time is that in many cases, lifestyle can do as much or even more than medications can. We have to add next the exercise component. And the next video that I'd like you to look at is done by Darren Morton, talking about the value of exercise in the treatment and reversal and prevention of diabetes. So we'll look at that video next.
Now clearly, diet is incredibly important when it comes to diabetes. And the optimal diet is ideal because plant-based whole foods are broken down slowly, so it makes it easier to manage blood sugar levels. And as we've learnt, the optimal diet can even help with the underlying causes of diabetes, which means that it can even help with its reversal. And so the takeaway message is that if you're a diabetic, you don't need some special variation of the optimal diet. It's ideal for you just the way it is, just as it is for everyone else. But while diet is incredibly important for the prevention and the management of diabetes, I can't stress enough that so too is physical activity. In fact, the American Diabetes Association say that physical activity is a cornerstone of diabetes care. And one of the reasons for this is that exercise actually helps improve the effectiveness of insulin within our body. And insulin is very involved in blood sugar level control. How's this? Just one single bout of aerobic exercise can increase the effectiveness of insulin within our bodies for up to 3 days. How's that? But what I also want to say is that we're discovering it's not just aerobic activities that are great for diabetics, it's also resistance exercises. What we've discovered through regular resistance training, you can actually get the same benefits in terms of blood sugar level control as drug therapies. And for this reason, we actually recommend that diabetics should be involved in resistance training programs at least 2, or ideally 3 times each week. And of course, exercise does more than just help with our blood sugar level control. It also keeps other parts of our bodies healthy as well. And this is really important when it comes to diabetes. For example, it improves heart health. And we know that diabetics are more prone to heart disease. But it also increases your muscle strength and your bone strength, improves your mood, and just makes you all round more functional. And so the takeaway message is essentially that when it comes to diabetes, you can't go past the 2 basics when it comes to best care. That is food and fitness.
So before we actually get on and talk a little bit more about the different types of exercise, which is so important, I want to put up a poll question because we've talked about different types of diabetes so far. So I want to see what most of the people on the line answer about this poll question that we'll put up. And it really has to do with type 2 diabetes and where it occurs. So we can add that one next to the poll, to the screen. I got that 95% say yes. So the question really was, can younger children, adolescents and younger children get type 2 diabetes? Because the definition really is supposed to be that this is a disease of older people, of adults. But now, unfortunately, because of the, again, pandemic or epidemic of obesity in young children, we see type 2 adult onset diabetes being diagnosed in children. So when we really talk about exercise, and it's great what Darren talked about so far, that different types of exercise are really important. Aerobic exercise is extremely important in controlling diabetes, bringing down the blood sugar, creating more insulin sensitivity. But he also mentioned about resistance training. And that is such an important part of diabetes control and weight control and blood pressure control that I can't really emphasize how important that is. The research really shows that there are significant benefits of both types of exercise. And again, I've talked about this previously, you have to put exercise into your daily routine so that you make sure that you get it done. Before we get on to a few questions, I showed you the book on Mastering Diabetes by Cyrus and Robbie. One other individual that talks about how you can resolve so many of your health problems is Dr. David Katz. David talks about solving your health problems with your feet, fingers, and fork. But this is a great book that gives you more information about how you can solve so many of your health problems by using your feet, which basically means to walk, by using your fingers, and what he refers to in this case is not smoking, and by using your fork, which is probably in more cases than not, more effective than pills. So we really have to look at what we can do on a regular basis that makes a tremendous impact on lowering our risk factors for all chronic illnesses and lowering the incidence of diseases, including diabetes. Before we end and get on to some questions, resources for diabetics, obviously very, very important, including the two books that I just showed you. We want to use these programs, the Ask Dr. Sal Show programs, to really highlight the fact that we have many resources available. All of the modules that are in the CHIP program are so helpful. The CHIP facilitators that are on the line are more resources for controlling diabetes and for healthy living, but also all the individuals that are also involved as members and as graduates of the CHIP program are more resources for individuals that are suffering from and dealing with diabetes. So I just want to summarize before we get on to some questions. Carbohydrates are not the enemy. If you're eating the right carbohydrates and you're eating more plant-based foods, that's the solution. Obviously, the CHIP program gives you the ability to take the knowledge that you learn and turn it into action when you're in your homes, in your kitchen, at a restaurant, going to someone's house. Also emphasizing the fact that animal proteins come with a lot of animal fat, and that's one of the things, as we learned today, that really interferes with the function of insulin. Plant-based nutrition programs are not diets. They are nutrition programs that we should maintain lifelong, because this is really the solution for the treatment, the reversal, and the prevention of all diseases, all chronic illnesses. We should also really understand that pre-diabetes or pre-diabetics develop just as many complications as diabetics, as full-blown diabetics. So those individuals really need to be treated as aggressively as people with full-blown diabetes. So it's not that you might have a little bit of sugar. You hear this in the South. Well, I just have a little bit of sugar. What that actually means is that you're a pre-diabetic, but the research actually shows that those individuals go on to develop the same amount of eye problems, kidney problems, nervous system problems as full-blown diabetics. So they really need to be treated just as aggressively. Healthcare providers really can do a lot of work to help individuals minimize the risks that we've talked about so far. And I'd really like to present the people that are on the line that are CHIP participants or graduates to really take a challenge to stay on that plant-based diet if you're not already on it for at least 30 days, and then see exactly what happens with your blood sugars, your blood pressure, your cholesterol, and how you feel. And I guarantee you that, I can almost guarantee you that you will see tremendous improvements in all of those markers, and especially how you feel. The challenge for the facilitators, obviously, looking at these two books, if you have not already done so, Mastering Diabetes again, looking at the truth about food, really great resources that you could use for all of the members that are in your program. And then again, seeing yourselves as champions for lifestyle medicine, being role models for healthy living, and really helping people through the challenges that we all deal with on a regular basis. So that's really the end of my monologue. I'm not sure if we have a few questions in the chat box. Can you become a diabetic from eating good fats such as nuts, avocados, vegetable oils, excluding animal products? Well, the short answer is no. I think if you're eating an adequate amount and not too many nuts on a daily basis, oils are a concern. When you look at the nutritional value of oils, any oils whatsoever, every tablespoon is 120 calories of pure fat. So in general, there's not a really good reason to use a lot of oil, because you're just adding 120 calories with every tablespoon of oil that you use. And if you are pre-diabetic, obviously that might move you. So maybe the answer is yes in that regard, might move you from a pre-diabetic state to a diabetic state. You can learn how to cook with an air fryer, with using organic vegetable oil. There are other ways to cook your food in substitution for using any kind of oils in general. Does keeping your insulin levels low help reduce the problem with insulin resistance? You actually want to see that your blood insulin levels are in the normal range of around 10. That's when, at least the lab that we use. The reason for that is, if you have a high insulin level, it tells you that the body is becoming insensitive to the insulin. Your cells are not able to use the insulin the way they're supposed to, and you're starting on that trajectory, that road towards going from pre-diabetes to diabetes. So it's a great marker over time, and I do this with most of my diabetics. In addition to checking their blood sugar level, I look at their A1C, I look at their insulin level, and if you're concerned that the individual is moving more along that spectrum from pre-diabetes to diabetes, you can also look at other markers which will give you more indication that the individual is progressing in the wrong direction. You definitely want to keep that insulin level low, because again, also high insulin levels will increase your risk for cancers over time. With gyms closing, do you have recommendations with overall resistance exercises? So yes, definitely. With the pandemic right now, obviously a lot of gyms have closed. So people have had to learn how to exercise on their own. And it's really amazing to see how many people are outside now walking, jogging, running, riding their bicycles and such. But so many people have also bought weights for their homes so that they can create a home gym. But you really don't have to buy weights to do resistance exercise. When you think about it, just doing squats, going up and down, doing lunges, sit to stand exercises, those are really helpful exercises for the muscles in your lower body. And then for your upper body, you can do resistance exercises by doing push-ups, getting weights, anything around the house that's heavy that you can actually lift to do some upper body work. Because in general, many people as they get older really develop weakness, especially in their upper body, but also in the lower body. If you develop weakness in the lower body, your risks of being a little wobbly on your feet and possibly stumbling and falling are significant. So weight training exercises, resistance exercises are extremely important, not only for diabetic control, but also for fall prevention and osteoporosis prevention, so on and so forth. So the list goes on and on. So we're really at the end of the program. Obviously, we could talk for hours about diabetes. It's such an important thing to really focus on because we know that chronic illnesses have continued to get worse and worse over the years. We've learned about the association between obesity and weight problems and diabetes, how important it is to take care of people aggressively with prediabetes. And again, looking at the pillars of lifestyle medicine and using the CHIP program really effectively to manage all of those chronic health problems, knowing that nutrition really provides the foundation for healthy living. The CHIP program really gives you the ability to take that knowledge and put it into action. And when you do that, people have a lower risk of disease and a lower incidence of disease. So use that knowledge going forward. We will be on the line again next week at the same time. And in the meantime, keep yourselves well, be role models for healthy living, and stay safe, stay healthy, and God bless you all. Thank you.